Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another PalaView market research video. Today, we're going to be discussing the great tokenization and everything you need to know about real-world asset tokenization. Yesterday, we talked about Pantera Capital and their projections specifically regarding the growth of the stablecoin space, but a lot of their assumptions about why the stablecoin space as a whole is going to grow massively over the next 2 to 20 years, is due to real world asset tokenization and the liquidity pools and a lot of things that we talked about yesterday. So if you are starting this video and you haven't watched yesterday's video, I would really encourage you to watch that video to inform this discussion today. Now, I am stealing all of this information from another place. I'm not going to even tell you where they're from. I'm a thief today. Why am I not going to tell you who made this? It's because they have their own token and things like that, and I haven't really fully vetted them. So we're just going to steal this and not give them any credit at all. Okay. So at least I'm being open and honest about it from the get-go, right? Now, if you're not already aware, what are the benefits of tokenizing a real-world asset? Well, there's many, and the four, these are the primary four, okay? We unlock the ability to fractionalize the ownership wildly further. So we already see private equity funds, KKR, for example, tokenized one of their funds. And before the fund was tokenized, their minimum check size, I believe, was $2.5, maybe $3 million. Afterwards, after the tokenization of the fund through Securitize, they are now allowing people to get in for, I think, $150,000, $200,000. So you're cutting it down by more than 10 times the ability for people to access certain investment opportunities. Because what is the blockchain allowing us to do? It's allowing us to automate many different legal processes. And that's only just covering one of those domains, all right? We have increased liquidity, and I would argue that it's not necessarily increased liquidity. It's more that there's increased potential for the velocity of liquidity to grow and shrink. But overall, it will result in increased liquidity. Okay, I think that's a more accurate description of how tokenization can benefit these assets. Enhanced transparency, massively important. And of course, reduce transaction fees. So you might be confused or a little bit unaware about like, what are these real world assets? Like, what are we even talking about? What does this include? So it includes probably a lot more than you think. Both, and I like how they break down from tangible assets and intangible assets. So really easy to understand. So you probably understand that real estate properties, art, watches, all these different kind of collectibles, commodities, all these things are very tangible. You can literally hold it in your hand, right? That's what tangible means. It's something that's physical, right? So not only are we able to increase our ability to trade, own, share, provide liquidity for, create insurance policies around these types of assets in a decentralized finance environment on the other side of this regulation that hopefully David Sachs is going to successfully deploy on, right? Because he's the guy who's now in charge of what crypto regulation will look like as we enter Donald Trump's presidential administration, okay? Moving on, intangible assets are things like patents, air rights, very cool, carbon credits, time, crazy, brand value, goodwill, copyrights, agricultural future crop yields, right? All of these things is essentially what? The next generation of tokenization. And this is where things get interesting. So if we look at the TVL of the top 10 sectors in DeFi today, we will see RWA is a tiny, tiny fraction, $6.1 billion worth, which is so minuscule. I mean, DEXs, bridges, liquid restaking and restaking protocols have more than double the amount of total value locked within that sector today. So in this present moment, we can, because RWA inevitably becomes by far the largest on this list, I think probably really quickly, okay? Like maybe even before the end of this year, guys. Not, I don't think that's even a bold claim, personally. Now, there are all these different predictions, right? Look at this. McKinsey, 21.co, Citi, these are guys who are paid based on their projections on these things. This is why they make the big bucks, okay? So just to read this through, multiple research reports from established firms have projected the market size for tokenized assets by 2030. These forecasts range from conservative estimates of 2 trillion to more optimistic predictions of 30.1 trillion. The wide range in these projections reflects the varying perspectives on the potential growth and adoptions in this sector. So you can see McKinsey saying by 2030, the RWA space is going to reach either between 2 trillion and 4 trillion. And we can see here it's at 6.1 billion, right? And this is only 5 years away, guys. I mean, it's 2025, right? 4 trillion, 4 trillion, 10.9 trillion, 10.9 trillion, 16, 30 trillion. And I'm probably by 2030, I'm probably more in this 10 to 16 camp. So we're about to experience an adoption curve that I don't like. That it's just this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? This isn't a once in a generation opportunity. This is a once in your lifetime opportunity, and there is a difference. Now, let's visualize the size of this market. So Chainlink, the global, they basically tell us that the global market for real world assets before it becomes tokenized is $867 trillion. So, and this is a hilarious number. Currently, 0.001346%, so 1/1000th of 1% effectively, of this value exists on chain. So this is visualized, tokenized market including stablecoins, tokenized market excluding stablecoins, right? So this process has not started because it's not even illegal. It's not legal to start this process. And that's something we're not really going to go too deep into right now. But as someone who's participated in RWA-like projects in the past, you can't get too far if there's not regulation teaching you and showing you, how do I do this legally? How do I sell a mortgage on a decentralized application legally? So what are the industries that are worthy of your exploration within this niche that I'm describing? Well, like we talked about yesterday, stablecoins is a massive one. That's real world asset. Currencies are a great example of a real world asset, right? Private credit, super bullish on private credit. There's this amazing project that's not listed here called Credix. This guy, Thomas, and I'm decently acquainted with. He runs it. Very, very competent, amazing guy. He basically helps people in places like Brazil and Colombia get car loans and car financing because it's much more difficult to get loans on cars outside of the United States, and especially in these developing nations in South America, where things are much poorly, they're poorly banked areas. So if you can be a person who has a good job, a good income, and you're still not going to get a good car loan. And so this guy is right now selling car loans to people through his decentralized application, which is just an amazing thing. So that is not going to be something that slows down. That will continue because realistically speaking, guys, if you have a token-backed application that is then able to create a easier loan to capture, right? Like say, just following this car loan example, if my car loan is cheaper, easier to get, and I'm then also in becoming a part of a community, right, that I'm an early stakeholder in, those three value propositions alone is going to dominate the competition, right? Because how can just your typical car financier compete with that? Do you understand? Again, real estate, securities, commodities, all refi is, I haven't really thought about refi so much. Collectibles, intellectual property. There is so much that's just beginning to start on chain that will continue to go. And here's some interesting new projects too. I haven't really looked too much into these, but Skytrade, tokenized air rights, crazy. Um, Power Ledger, tokenized energy. Yeah, there's a bunch of guys who are like tokenizing electricity. Entheos is another platform that my friend is a part of that is doing very interesting work on this. And then tokenized time. I'm definitely going to check time.fun out because that's really, really interesting. So how much has been brought on chain in 2024? Following the record amount brought on chain in 2022, driven by $2.4 billion in private credit. 2023 saw a slight decline, but 2024 has rebounded strongly and is now the year with the most amount brought on chain. So you can see we have a weird growth in the, RWA TVL, so on an annualized basis that we're seeing here. But the trend is good. It's exponential. And especially in another 2, 3, 4 years, we're going to be able to show that a little bit better than we can now. Because obviously 2019 to 2014, if you're an institutional banker, it's not really enough data, no? So how do we capitalize? According to this mysterious group who made this this blog post that I'm completely stealing from very openly, how do we capitalize on this great tokenization? Well, one, we want to invest in infrastructure projects aiding in asset tokenization to gain exposure to the entire sector's growth potential. This is what I've been telling you for over a year now. You want to invest in the companies that are creating the migration, the bridges, right? You want to invest in the companies that are literally taking these assets and bringing them on chain, right? Because essentially what's happening, there's a migration from paper assets to digitized assets, right? That already happened. Now we have a kind of a digitized asset slash like paper backed asset thing, and we're migrating it to being a tokenized version of a digitized asset. Do you follow me? So whoever is creating the bridge, whoever is creating the services, the software, the consulting, right? Those are the early people you want to be tracking, right? Because you don't necessarily want to hedge or invest in, speculate in the projects that are early movers, right? Even some of these, like these are early movers, and early movers are, well, one of my favorite sayings in investing is being early is just another form of being wrong, right? Being too early is another form of being just wrong, right? You can be correct in your assumptions, you can be correct in your research, your fundamental research, even your technical analysis. But if you are still too early, you aren't making money, right? So we are interested in how do we make money? And if you want to make money, this is what you do. You find the companies that are consulting and providing all these services to get assets that are existing, right? And you make them that essentially take these existing assets and migrate them on chain. Okay, I hope that was clear. Number two, access high value assets like real estate or fine art through transactional. Yeah, so like, I actually don't agree with this. So we're just going to skip that. Participate in DeFi protocols using tokenized real world assets as collateral for borrowing, lending. Yeah, so this is already happening. Like MakerDAO is basically like, that they're already buying treasuries to back DAI tokens, right? So this is already happening. Explore intangible asset tokenization for potentially higher risk, higher reward opportunities in uncharted markets. This is actually probably good advice. You want to, because there are markets that are under monetized, right? So maybe time, like a creator, like an influencer, creator's time is probably an underutilized, under monetized little niche in the entire market. No? So there are definitely areas that are prematurely developed within our market because of technological limitations. So it's very possible that these intangible assets, right? So let's go back to these. Some of these intangible assets that are currently more difficult to monetize, trade, or whatever the heck you want to call it, um, these are very likely to have a lot of experimentation, especially, and this is something I'm actually increasingly trying to learn about, but I haven't seen too many projects that I'm impressed with. But some of these science related DAOs, I actually think that research funding is, especially for bio and anything related to like pharmaceuticals or your human health, is one of the most corrupt institutions in the history of mankind. Just a little side note. Um, in America, you may not know this, but in America today, doctors have what is or is suffering from a lack of information. Every doctor in America is poorly informed. How do I know this? Because pharmaceutical companies, for almost a century now, the same companies, which are subsidized by the government, by the way, with your tax dollars, have funded an ungodly amount of research. However, the research that they share publicly and or to the institutions or to people who the publicly accessible research funded by pharmaceutical companies compared to the amount of research that has just been literally like thrown away and hidden, but it's research that has still been conducted but doesn't prove the things that those pharmaceutical companies want it to prove, is enormous. Okay, so we live in one of the most corrupt times in the history of mankind when it comes to our public health. And it really just comes down to that. Pharmaceutical companies are the ones who pay Harvard and all these different companies to do research. Stanford, all these guys, right? They get money from corporations to do the research. The research that you then get to learn about as a public person, as a doctor working in the space, is the stuff that the research, is the stuff that the pharmaceutical companies allow them to take public, which is a small fraction of the entire body of research that has occurred over the last century. Okay, so a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization that is dedicated to helping fund projects that are in that space, that isn't then back, isn't so, to create more competition as to who's funding what, right? Could be a really super crazy positive thing. Okay. So there is huge potential in DAOs in the science niche where we're like, imagine a DAO that's like only focused on solving this extremely niche, like cerebral palsy or some like super niche disease, right? And people who are dedicated and who are very passionate about that specific disease can participate in that token, and they can know that they're funding these things ethically, right? Okay, last slide. Here are some pretty interesting startups that are in these spaces. I haven't checked out all of these. I'm familiar with some of them, but these are some some projects that are already participating in the real world asset space. KlimaDAO is a total failure of a project, so they have a lot of BS in here. You see, this is Credix, what I was talking about earlier with my buddy Thomas. TrueFi's probably kind of cool. Goldfinch is definitely very cool. So yeah, check these out. Ondo, we've done a report on Ondo in the past for Palaview, and if you haven't checked out the newsletter, you definitely should. But guys, that's today's video. I hope you learned something. I hope that this was good. And I look forward to continuing to do these more and more. And yeah, and I guess it's been a while, so we're getting back in the flow of this. But if there's any topics that you guys want me to cover after I, and over the next week or so, cover all my, I guess I got a long list of things I want to cover. So start commenting, start, letting me know what you want to see. All right, guys, love y'all, and peace and victory. All right, hope you guys are just tackling this new year just like absolute savages. No, see you guys.